What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 5 best Path of Exile 2 builds in 2025. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on. Then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it for both the leveling and endgame. And then finally we will go over the passive skill tree, stats, your skill rotations, and even what charm should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. If you are looking for any of these builds on the website, then click my link in this video description or the pinned comment. So this setup is a new combo between the Spark Sorceress and the Cast Comet and the Time Freeze. Our build will rely on high spark crits rather than drowning them in hundreds of different sparks. This way our clear speed will be as good as any other sorceress, but against bosses is the place where we are going to shine. Our crit scaling will reach crazy levels of damage. Even if you don't one-shot the boss, then you will have about 13 to 14 seconds, plus 7 seconds and even 3 more additional seconds of the time stops in your disposal. So if you are ready to destroy enemies and pretty much one-shot the bosses, then this is the one for you. So let me show you the build, and for the main class we are going with the Sorceress and our ascendancy is the Chronomancer. Then for the first skill we have Time Freeze with the Wind Wave, second Wind and Unbreakable. Then second we got the Time Snap with no support gems. Then next we got Temporal Rift with Ingenuity. Next we have Temporal Chains with the Curse Ground, Encumbrance, Expanse, Magnified Effect and Ritualistic Curse. Then for the next one we have the Cast on Critical with the Comet, Spell Echo, Elemental Focus, Inspiration and the Concentrated Effect. Next we got Conductivity with the Heightened Curse and the Focus Curse. Next we got the Soul Offering with the Minion Mastery, Dance Maccabi and the Ablation. Next we have Frost Wall with the Icicle, Cold Mastery, Spell Cascade and the Cold Exposure. Next up we have the Archmage with the Clarity and the Lightning Mastery. And finally we are using the Spark with the Acceleration, Electrocute, Consider Casting, Arcane Surge and the Arcane Tempo. Most of this setup is structured around using our sparks for AoE and temporal chains with Time Freeze for the single target. So we use gems and skills that will support and increase their duration and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at the spell damage node, and then go like this while taking all of these 3, so the raw power, practice signs and the critical overload. Then now we keep on going until we get to the sudden escalation. Then from here again we keep going until the top and then take right, and then keep going until we get to the Whispers of the Doom, and then get both these lightning nodes. Then afterwards we keep going while taking pretty much all of these nodes right here, and then our second stop point is at this Eldritch Battery Keystone. And then finally from here we want to get all the way down here while taking these 3, so the True Strike, for the Juggler and the Deadly Force. And now from this point and onwards we can circle back and unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. All of these nodes that we got are very useful, but the ones I mentioned have the top priority, as they're the most important ones to acquire early on in the game, to make our build functional, and then later on the priority doesn't really matter that much. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Footprints in the Sand. Then second, now and again. Then next we want the ultimate command, and then finally select the Unbound and Core. So feel free to use this exact same path as we have right here. And don't forget to check this video's description to find the link for this website, and this should make it easier for you to follow the path. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Siphoning Wand, and for the bonus stats we want to gain damage as extra lightning damage, increase spell damage, more to max mana, more levels to all cold spells, increased mana regen and critical hit chance. Then also we got an offhand called the Expert Plummet Focus with Energy Shield. And for more we want increased spell and lightning damage, max mana, more to intelligence and increased mana regen and critical hit chance to spells. Then also we have the second weapon set, which is very important for our build to fully function. So for the weapon we got the Rattling Scepter with the max mana, reduced attribute requirements and more levels of all minion skills. While for our offhand we got the Crest of the Ardura Shield with increased armor and energy shield, more to intelligence, and increased mana regen and cooldown recovery. Then for helmet we have the Expert Feather Tiara with energy shield, and for more we got max energy shield, max mana and more to fire and cold resistance. Then for the chest we have the Expert Kate Raiment with energy shield. And for more we want increased mana regen and flask mana recovery, more to spirit and chaos and lightning resistance. Then for the belt we have the plate belt with more to armor, max mana and cold and fire resistance. Then for gloves we got the expert Sombry gloves with energy shield. And for more we want max energy shield, max mana and more to critical damage bonus. Then for boots we're using the expert feather sandals with energy shield. And for more we need increased movement speed, max energy shield and max mana. Then for our first ring we got the amethyst ring with the chaos resistance. And for more we want increased lightning damage, max mana, increased cast speed and mana regen. While for the second one we have the breach ring with increased cold and lightning damage, max mana, increased cast speed and increased mana regen rate. And then finally for amulet we have the solar amulet with more to spirit. And for bonus stats we want max mana, more to spirit and increased mana regen. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is the best case scenario setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. So our rotation is quite simple, but you will need to get used to it. So what we want to do is first of all start by using the temporal chains. Then we follow that up with the conductivity. Then next use the time freeze in the combination with the soul offering. Then next we also want to activate the frost wall, and then from here just spam the sparks until the boss dies. But mainly for AoE and weak enemies we basically will turn into a spark build. So just keep spamming sparks and see all of these crazy crits popping off left and right. The only thing you need to keep in mind is the defense. Our build does not have energy shields, so mind over matter is a good defensive layer, but should not be heavily relied on in the endgame. While the time freeze has a high cooldown, so feel free to use it 24/7. Then also the second wind for 33% no cooldown. And then the time snap reset will allow you to use the time freeze continuously in the combat. Overall, if you can master these skills, then you will become unkillable with very high DPS output at the same time. So, this endgame build will utilize the skeletal frost mages by buffing them insanely high, so then in return we can do huge amount of damage. They also can freeze enemies and bosses, which will make very hard content a walk in the park. This build's greatest strength is its primary defense, so we will have a massive amount of energy shield, and by using the Grim Feast we will double it, so in the endgame we will be able to reach up to 13,000 energy shield. On top of this, our setup's playstyle will allow you to clear quite aggressively, while still being able to pull back and let your enemies protect you from the enemies whenever needed. If you are looking for very OP but passive gameplay, where most of the work is done by your minions, then this is the build for you. So let me show you the build, and for the main class, I have chosen to go with the Witch and our ascendancy is Infernalist. Then for the first skill, we have the Skeletal Frost Mages with the support gems such as the Arcane Tempo, Scatter Shot, Feeding Frenzy, Vault Shards and the Cold Mastery. Then second, we get the Skeletal Storm Mage with Concoction, Stormfire, Lightning Penetration and the Overcharge. Then next we got Skeletor Cleric with Ingenuity, Last Gasp and the Minion Mastery. Next we have Pain Offering with Persistence, Ablution, Inspiration and Fan of Rage. Next up we have the Hypothermia with a Heightened Curse, Spell Cascade and Focus Curse. Next we got Frost Bomb with a Spell Cascade, Fan of Mana, Fan of Blood and the Strip Away. Next we got the Grim Feast with the Clarity. Next we have Summon Infernal Hound with a Meat Shield, Maim, Culling Strike, Fire Exposure and the Fire Mastery. And finally for the last one we are using the Sigil of the Power with the Magnified Effect. Most of this setup is structured around using our Skeletal Frost Mages to delete enemies in seconds, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their defense and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at the spell and minion damage node. And go like this while taking the Raw Destruction and the Power of the Dead. Then next we want to move to the right and get all of these three, so Pure Energy, Dampening Shield and the Living Dead, as well as get this whole circle. Then afterwards we keep on going while taking Necrotized Flesh and Relentless Fallen. Then next we go like this, and then from this point take the left path and take all of these nodes. And then from this point and onwards you can go here up to the top and just unlock all the other nodes in whatever order you prefer. Also, keep in mind that all of these nodes that we got are very useful, but the ones I mentioned have the top priority, as they are the most important ones to acquire early on in the game. to make our build functional, and then in the late game to make it even more powerful. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Loyal Hellhound for that minion skill and 20% reduced damage. Then second we get Altered Flesh. This will help out in dealing with physical damage if you have chaos resistance. Or when you start stacking maximum fire damage, then you will take less cold and lightning damage. Then for our third pick we have the Berat's Will. This will give us more maximum spirit, but in return it will reduce our life by 25%. This might seem like a huge debuff, but it's 100% worth it, because of how insanely high we have our energy shield stacked up. And then finally for the last one we got the Berat's Hand. So feel free to use the exact same path as I have right here. And don't forget to check this video's description to find the link for this website, and this should make it easier for you to follow the tree. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus passives that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. So when we start we wanna first of all go to the left side and get all of these nodes, and then go down until you get to this keystone called the Deadly Evolution. And then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this we have even more passives. Which order in which you unlock them doesn't matter, so this time it's up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have the Lyrium. Then third we have the bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Rattling Scepter. This is one of the most important items as it will increase our minions' damage. However, if you prefer more damage over using a shield for passive block chance, then you can wield a scepter together with a spiked club, for that extra levels to all minion skills. And for bonus stats we want to get more to spirit, max mana and plus levels of all minion skills. Then also for the offhand we got the advanced Omen Crest Shield with a block. And for stats we want max energy shield, more to spirit and chaos resistance. Pretty much for this one we want a high energy shield and armor base. And a really good unique to acquire early on is the Oak's Horn. However, you can later on replace it with other options that give you 2 sockets or even more to spirit. Then for the helmet we have the Expert Feather Tiara with the energy shield. And for more we want max energy shield, max life and plus levels to all minion skills. Then for chest we have the Expert Altar Robe with the energy shield. And for more we got even more energy shield, more to spirit, as well as fire and cold resistance. Then for belt we have the Fine Belt with a faster flask recovery. And for more we want max life, max mana and more to charm slots. Then for gloves we got the Expert Entrusted Gloves with the energy shield. And for more we want even more max energy shield, max life and chaos resistance. Then for boots we're using the Expert Feather Sandals with the energy shield. And for more we need increased movement speed, max energy shield, as well as chaos and lightning resistance. Then for the first ring we got the Prismatic Ring with more to all elemental resistances. And for the extra stats we got max mana, max life, and again even more percentage to all elemental resistances. Well then for the second one we have the Amethyst Ring, as this is a very easy place to get even more chaos resistance. And for more we got max mana, adds physical damage to attacks and cold and fire resistance. And then finally for the amulet we have the Lunar Amulet with a lot of max energy shield. And for more we want more to spirit, more levels to all minion skills, as well as chaos resistance. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup, which would be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And as you can see from the gameplay, this is one of the easiest and simplest builds in the game. At all times our minions are going to be active, so then all we need to do is run around the map while simply using the Pain Offering, then Hypothermia, and then from here just spam the Frost Bombs, and that's about it. As I said at the start, this build is very simple, and for weak enemies, you won't really have to do anything besides run into them and then the minions will do the rest. However, what I usually like to do is also keep spamming the Sigil of the Power as soon as it's up, and it will give us a nice simple buff to increase our DPS even more. And then finally, especially in the beginning when you're not geared enough and sometimes may die, then make sure that your elemental resistances are at 75%. Furthermore, make sure that your specific items that you have equipped will give you as much energy shield as possible. This is for sure the best Pathfinder build that pretty much just runs insanely fast, and throws out freeze bottles at your enemies that explode through hundreds of targets and one-shots them in split seconds. We are going to be doing about 5 million DPS with a fully maximized gear, and we are also going to be perma-freezing mobs and pinnacle bosses, which will give us a very easy playstyle as we won't have to worry about the enemies too much. Also, for our defense, we are stacking as much energy shield as possible, which will give us anywhere from 8 to 15,000 shields. Overall, this build excels in both clearing and boss fights, and all that we will need to focus on is boosting our survivability and managing flask charges effectively. So let me show you the build, and for the main class, I have chosen to go with the Ranger and our ascendancy is the Pathfinder. Then for the first skill, we have the Shattering Concoction with the support gems such as the Scatter Shot, Martial Tempo, Cold Mastery and the Super Critical. Then second, we got the Escape Shot with no support gems. Next we got the Herald of the Ice with the Cold Penetration, Ice Bite and the Cold Infusion. Next we have the Hypothermia with the Cursed Ground, Heightened Curse and Magnified Effect. Next up we have the Grim Feast with no gems. Next we got the Cast on Critical with the Eye of Winter, Inspiration, Impetus and the Energy Retention. Then next we have the Alchemist Boon with Precision. Next we have the Lightning Warp with the Persistence, Overcharge and the Lightning Mastery. And finally, for the last one, we are using the Ball Lightning with the Arcane Tempo and Acceleration. Most of this setup is structured around using the Scattering Concoction to delete huge amount of enemies in seconds. So we use gems and skills that will support and increase their duration and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Then next up we have our passive tree. And if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this projectile damage node. Then go like this while also grabbing the Honed Instincts and Vile Wounds. Then from here we keep on going while also taking these two, so Master Fletching and the Cooked. And then from this point you can just unlock all the other nodes in whatever order you prefer. So just simply get these nodes that increase our DPS, and then just keep going like this in a straight line. And then finally, after you got most of the nodes, then you can circle back and grab all the last ones like the lightning and the mana regen. This is one of the easiest 3 builds to follow, as pretty much the whole path is in a straight line. So just follow it, and if your build lacks something at that current time, then you can select it as well. And then now, let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to get the Brew Concoction, as this will give you the option to pick the Shattering Concoction. That provides us with our main skill, and which is the core of our build. Then second, we get the Connected Chemistry. Then third, we select the Enduring Elixirs. And then finally, for the last one, we get the Traveler's Wisdom, which gives us 6 extra passive nodes. This might not sound like much, but at the endgame we can see a huge impact, especially if we spend them on more energy shields. So feel free to use the exact same path as I have right here. And don't forget to check this video's description to find a link for this website. And this should make it easier for you to follow the tree. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and this build will benefit a lot from a high pack size, so that our freeze can spread through the use of the Shattering Concoction. So then when we start, we wanna first of all go to the left side, and then get all of these nodes. Then next we now go to the right and get all of these nodes as well. And then from this point and onwards, you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this, we have even more passives, which order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter. So this time it's up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium. Then third we have the bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Now in the next part we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Widow Wail with as much quiver effect as possible. So at least 220% is highly recommended, as this will make you hit the 300% breakpoint with all of the nodes on the passive skill tree. However, if you are going full solo and you don't want a Widow Wail, then use any bow that has plus levels of all projectile skills, or pretty much anything else that would increase our DPS. On top of this, we also have an offhand called the Visceral Quiver, and the most OP thing on this one is increased damage with the bow skills. However, we've heard that developers might nerf it soon, so if that happens they look for stats like plus levels of all projectile skills, increased crit chance and projectile speed. Then for the helmet we have the Expert Vicar Tiara with the Energy Shield, And for more we want max and increased even more energy shield, and fire and lightning resistance. Then for chest we have the expert Cant Raiment with the energy shield. And for more we want increased mana regen, max and increased energy shield, more to spirit and cold and lightning resistance. Then for the belt we have the fine belt with the faster flask recovery. And for the bonus stats we got increased even more flask recovery, fire and lightning resistance, as well as more to charm slots. Then for gloves we got the expert Javel gloves with the energy shield. And for more we want even more max and increased energy shield, increases to attack speed, cold resistance and increased critical damage bonus. Then for boots we're using the expert feather sandals with the energy shield. And for more we want increased movement speed, max energy shield and fire resistance. Then for the first ring we got the breach ring with the max quality of 50%. And for more we got increased cold damage, intelligence, cold and chaos resistance. While then for the second one we have the sapphire ring with the cold resistance. And for more we got cold damage, intelligence and lightning and chaos resistance. And then finally for the amulet we have the lunar amulet with the max energy shield. And for more we want even more energy shield, more to spirit, plus levels of all projectile skills, and percentage to critical damage bonus. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And as you can see from the gameplay, this is one of the easiest and simplest builds in the game. So while running around in a map, you should not be using anything more than just the Shattering Concoction. Rare monsters will die very fast because of the freeze and the high crit chance. However, the only thing that we need to use is our life flasks to keep our energy shields. And then second for bossing, this time we want to start with a ball lightning. Then second, use the lightning warp. Then next activate hypothermia. And then finally, after all of this, you can simply spam the Shattering Concoction and just keep up our debuffs as they expire. So this is an endgame build that utilizes the power of the attribute stacking to increase its performance. Our main goal is to stack as much strength, dexterity and intelligence as possible, to then scale it with our unique items such as the Pillar of the God and the Hand of Wisdom and the Action. One of the best things about our setup is that all it needs to function at the start is the Pillar of the Caged God, which is pretty affordable on a budget, but then later on we can scale it incredibly high with each unique item and massive power upgrades and much more. Our main playstyle will revolve around using the Tempest flurry in the combination with the charged staff that can hit multiple times and create lightning shockwaves. If you want to zoom through the maps insanely fast while destroying anything and everyone that crosses your path, then this is the one for you. So let me show you the build, and for the main class, I have chosen to go with the Mercenary, and our ascendancy is the Gambling Legionnaire. Then for the first skill we have the Tempest Flurry with the support gems such as the Martial Tempo, Inspiration, Glacianation and the Ice Bite. Then second we get the Charged Staff with the Primal Armament, Lightning Infusion, Overcharge and the Concentrated Effect. Then next we got the Tempest Belt with the Concentrated Effect, Overabundance, Elemental Focus and the Close Combat. Next we have the Wind Dancer with the Blind, Maim and the Pin. Next up we have the Herald of the Ice with Magnified Effect, Lightning Infusion, Primal Armament and the Elemental Focus. Next we got the Combat Frenzy with the Profusion. And finally, for the last one we are using the Glacial Cascade with no support gems. Most of the setup is structured around using the Tempest Fury and the Charged Staff to delete huge amount of enemies in seconds. So we use gems and skills that will support and increase their duration and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Also, at this point I would usually show you a leveling build, but this time our particular setup is specifically meant for only endgame, because it will only start working when we get the quarterstaff called the Pillar of the Caged God. So until that point I would recommend to use my cheap gas grenade build, which link you can find in the description and on this website. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this armor and evasion node, then go like this while also grabbing the battle hardened and the relentless. Then from here keep on moving while also on our way getting these two, and also the beef. Then afterwards we go like this, and then here at the end we want to go up top and get this blood magic. We want to use this specific node because scaling mana and handling mana cost is expensive, while maintaining very high tankiness, so this is a great keystone to solve any potential mana problem. Then after this, we now want to circle back and this time go to the bottom and get this brute shanked. And then as you can see from here, the whole path pretty much just goes in a straight line, so just follow it while also grabbing everything that you can see right here. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is that you don't need to get these two, so the lightning rod and the flash storm, if you still haven't equipped the hands of the wisdom and action. And then from here, the most important nodes and the ones we want to get is the storm and the river, as they increase our evasion rating while also letting the freeze to build up faster for more consistent explosions with the herald of the ice. And on top of this, it also makes keeping up our charge staff much easier, by giving it an extra duration when consuming a single power charge, since it counts as using an extra charge. And then finally, the last most important part is the resonance, as it is one of the core nodes of our build. It will convert the frenzy charges gained from the combat frenzy into the power charges, which will allow us to cast our insane charge staff. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to get the adaptive capability, then second get the enhanced effectiveness. Because of how many attributes we will stack, this node will grant us a massive amount of life early on. With about 500 strength, this node will result in more than 1000 extra life. Then for the third one we want to get the integrated efficiency. And then finally for the last one we get the gem studded, which is another powerful node. If we don't get this one, then our build will run out of the effective support gems. So we want to get it to not only increase our DPS, but also to create the bigger explosions by using the Herald of the Ice. So feel free to use the exact same path as we have right here. And don't forget to check this video's description to find the link for this website. And this should make it easier for you to follow the path. Next up we have our Atlas passives. So when we start we want to first of all go to the right side and get all of these nodes, until we get to this keystone called the Deadly Evolution. Then from here we want to circle back to the middle, and this time go up top, until we get to the second keystone called the Corrupted Infusion. And then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this, we have even more passives. Which order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter, so this time it's up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium, then third we have the bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Then next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Pillar of the Cage God. This is relatively cheap and common item, however in the early game we want to use the Glacial Rune or the Storm Rune to increase its flat damage output even more. On top of this, if you get lucky enough, then you can also find this quarterstaff with 3 sockets. Then for the helmet we have the 3 dragons. And after you get the Hands of the Wisdom in action, then this is the third priority that you should get, as it is mandatory to ensure that you are freezing enemies for a massive Herald of the Ice explosion. Then for the chest we have the Warrior Invictus. This is another powerful item, but this time not mandatory whatsoever, so use this one or anything similar. And for stats we want to focus on increased evasion, more to strength, dexterity and intelligence, and more resistances like fire, cold, lightning and chaos. Then for the belt we have the double belt with increased charm charges. And for bonus stats we want max life, more to strength and chaos and fire resistance. Then for gloves we got the Hand of the Wisdom in action. This should be the second item that you prioritize after our weapon, as it is another core part of our build, and will enable us to stack our attributes and increase DPS by a massive amount. Then for the boots we're using the advanced hunting shoes with evasion and energy shield. And for more we want increased movement speed, max life, more to dexterity and fire and cold resistance. Then for first and second ring we got the same one called the Prismatic Ring, with more to all elemental resistances. And for more we want adds fire or cold damage to attacks, and more strength, dexterity and intelligence. And then finally for the amulet we have Ember Amulet with strength. And for more we want more to all attributes, more to strength and intelligence. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is the best setup in the endgame, and if you only can afford few things, then I would recommend to prioritize the weapon, then the gloves, and finally the headpiece. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. So for maps and AoV farming, we simply want to spam our Tempest flurry while making sure to maintain the charge staff for as long as possible. However, then for single targets and boss fights, We want to start by attacking with the Tempest Flurry to generate combo stacks, so then we use our Tempest belt and then continue attacking with the Tempest Flurry. This combo will freeze the bell and generate a power charge, so then afterwards we use our power charge by casting the charge staff. So then once the charge staff is active, we want to continue attacking the target with the Tempest Fury and replace the Tempest bell whenever it goes down. This setup is a very new version of one of the best builds in the game, the Lightning Arrow Deadeye. However, unlike in that build, in this one we are using the Ice Shot in the combination with the Lightning Rod and a Blink, which will give us this insane mobility and speed farming potential. What I like most about this setup is that we can simply spam one single skill and pretty much destroy tier 16 maps and reach up to 5 million DPS because of how many buffs we have working in the background. Like you can see from the gameplay, we are basically deleting enemies in split seconds. And on top of this, we can also delete bosses by us having also a very high boss damage from using the Lightning Rod and the Orb of Storms. At some point in the later game, some lowered gear players might run into a mana problem, but lucky for us, the Ranger has many tools to address this problem. And with the optimized gear, we need nothing more than a single stat roll on our weapon or gear to completely solve this issue. So if you don't mind using only from 1 to 2 skills and completely speed clearing through hundreds of enemies in few seconds, then let's get right into it. So let me show you the build, and for the main class I have chosen to go with the Ranger and our ascendancy is the Deadeye. Then for the first skill we have the Ice Shot with the support gems such as the Primal Armament, Martial Tempo, Cold Infusion, Ricochet and the Heft. Then second we get the Lightning Rod with a Scatter Shot, Concentrated Effect, Elemental Focus and the Close Combat. Then next we got the Orb of Storms with the Chain, Deep Freeze and the Fount of Mana. Next we have the Herald of the Thunder with the Execute and Elemental Focus. Next up we have the Herald of the Ice with the Long Shot, Cold Penetration, Magnified Effect and the Cold Mastery. Next we got Wind Dancer with the Cannibalism, Clarity and Herbalism. Next we have the Bow Shot with the Life Drain, Soul Thief, Wind Wave and the Blind. And finally for the last two we are using the Blink and the Mana Remnants with no support gems. Most of this setup is structured around using the Ice Shot and the Bow Shot to delete enemies in seconds, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their size and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and by the way our Javel placement is also important, so that's why we here have these type of lines. So then with that said, we want to start at this evasion node, and then go like this while also taking the cat-like agility. Then next we keep on going and take both of these, so master fletching and the freedom of movement. Then from here we want to go up here and then go to the left side, and then get all of these nodes. Then afterwards we circle back and now go until the end and take this feathered fletching. And from this point and onwards you can just unlock all the other nodes in whatever order you prefer. Also, when we take a look at this outline, you may think that we waste a lot of points just to get this Mind Over Matter keystone. However, this is a big part of our defense, as we are already doing insane amount of damage, mainly from our DPS nodes and the weapon and gear choices, so we can easily afford to do this. I did a lot of testing and it was very hard to survive tier 16 maps. So after I talked with a bunch of players and did testing, we figured out that going a bit overboard and taking the Mind Over Matter was a huge life changer for this specific build. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Gathering Winds, as it increases your movement and attack speed, while also giving you a huge evasion boost. Then second we get the Point Blank, which this time will increase your damage to the close proximity targets. Then next we wanna get the Endless Munitions, as it increases both your clear speed and single target damage. The Territorial is usually pretty hard, but it's definitely worth doing it as soon as you can, as this will give us a huge DPS boost. And then finally we want to get the Wind Ward, as especially when doing higher tier maps and content, you will need to get all the damage reduction that you can. Next up we have our Atlas passives. And the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus passives that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. So when we start we wanna first of all go to the right side and get all of these nodes, and then keep on going down until you get to this keystone called the Deadly Evolution. And then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want, But then on top of this, we have even more passives, which order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter, so again it's up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium, then third we have bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Then in the next part we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Widow Veil Bow with insane bonus stats, which gives us from 150 to 200% increased bonus, which is gained from equipping a quiver. To be honest, this is one of the biggest reasons of how we can get to 5 million DPS, and why you can see that crazy gameplay of one-shotting enemies. However, no matter what bow you use, this build will still function, but just not to the insane level that I can. So then for the bow stats, you want to look for attack speed, critical chance bonus, lightning damage, and pretty much anything else that will boost our DPS. And then for our offhand, we got the primed quiver, which this time is quite important. So with this we get increased attack speed, and for bonus stats we want to go with adds cold damage to attacks, more accuracy, increased projectile speed, plus levels to all projectile skills, even more increased attack speed and more to dexterity. Then for the helmet we have the expert hunter hood with evasion, and for more we want even more evasion and increased evasion. Then also max mana and fire and cold resistance. Then for the chest we got the Queen of the Forest with evasion, and for its stats we get increased evasion, fire, cold and lightning resistance. Also, we get increased movement speed per every 500 evasion. This is yet again the reason of why we build our evasion so high. However, again this is not required, so if you can afford this, then look for any other chest piece with similar stats. Then for the belt we have the utility belt with 20% quicker flask recovery, more evasion and max life, as well as fire and cold resistance. Then for gloves we got the Hand of the Wisdom and action. Same thing applies, if you don't want it, then just get anything else. But if I would say to get at least one of these expensive items, then this would be the one, as because of these gloves we want to stack our intelligence or dexterity as high as possible. And then for bonus stats we want dexterity, intelligence, increased attack speed and adds lightning damage to attacks. Then for boots we're using the expert lizard scale boots with evasion, and for bonus stats we get more evasion, cold and lightning resistance, as well as stun threshold. This is one of the only builds where we don't want movement speed on the boots, because our chest piece will give us movement speed from evasion, and at the same time disable any other movement speed modifier. In the endgame you will get more speed than any basic speed boots, so of course if you can then get this item. But if you can't, then go with any basic chest, and then just pick the movement speed on the boots. Then for the first ring we got the ruby ring with the fire resistance, and for more we got evasion, max mana, intelligence and increased mana regeneration rate. While for the second one we have the prismatic ring, with percentage to all elemental resistances. And for more we got increased cold damage, max mana, intelligence and lightning and chaos resistance. And then finally for the amulet we got the Crimson Amulet with a life regen per second. And for more we want max energy shield, max life, max mana, intelligence, more to all elemental resistances and chaos resistance. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And as you can see from the gameplay, this is one of the easiest and simplest builds in the game. So our main rotation is just to spam the ice shot and the bow shot for easy monster kills, which are most of our targets. But then specifically for bosses you can as well place down Orb of Storms, and then spam the ice shot and the lightning rod. This will give you a great buff and insane amount of shock lightning damage for single targets. And finally, if you're low geared and run into a mana problem, especially against bosses, then try to get one Javel with mana on kill, or mana on kill from the quiver. And as well, this might sound obvious, especially at the beginning, when you might not have yet unlocked mana on kill, but if you run out of mana then just simply cast less skills. And wait, you will be doing very high damage anyways, so casting few less skills won't really impact the gameplay that much. But it may reduce your mana consumption, especially if you're under geared or under leveled.